Hello my fellow AvGeeks, and welcome to the Tom Bradley Terminal at the Los Angeles International Airport. Today we will be flying Philippine Airlines to Manila's Ninoy Aquino International Airport, and their check-in counter is at the very end of the terminal. In fact, I think now is as good a time as ever to roll the intro. There is no intro. I don't have one. Yet. Maybe will we ever get I don't think we're ever gonna get an intro. After waiting over an hour for a wheelchair assist for my grandmother, we were underway through a packed check-in building. That being said, the terminal is well lit and very well decorated. Kind of. I decided to do a little something different with this Tripreport, and there will not be music added at all. Hey, take a look at that. That's the Air Tahiti Nui check-in. After passing through security, we passed by the Amex Centurion Lounge, which I promise I will one day experience, and gaze at this beautiful walkway in the meantime that leads to the main terminal building, which was also well designed. On the walk over to the gate, I had the pleasure of seeing this Air Tahiti Nui Boeing 787-9 in its gorgeous blue livery and the Korean Air A380, even if it was only a glimpse. I also saw an Air Premia Boeing 787 to Seoul, and our Boeing 777 out in the distance next to an El Al 787. The walk to the west side of the Tom Bradley terminal was surprisingly beautiful, with advertisements on the side showing all the destinations you can visit. A quick walk through the terminal reveals our bird, Romeo Papa Charlie 772, a 9.5-year-old Boeing 777-300ER, next to the El Al plane we saw earlier. Now I continued to meander about the terminal in search of breakfast for my grandmother and I saw the other Philippine Airlines flight from Los Angeles, PR 103, as I saw the El Al plane push back. We also once again get another view of the Korean Air Airbus A380 and a Scandinavian Airlines Airbus A350 out in the distance. It's over there somewhere. KLM ready for their flight to Amsterdam. I believe they take the 787-10 to Los Angeles, as well as a lot of West Coast destinations, actually. Surprising. Personally, I think Los Angeles is more of a 777-300ER destination myself, but, you know, whatever they think is right. Our bags then got gate checked for no additional charge because they were oversized by Philippine Airlines baggage policy, and we watched them get tagged as they were whisked away promptly. After a temporary delay, we watched our crew get the aircraft ready for departure. Now, one thing I noticed about the Philippine Airlines boarding process is that it's surprisingly chaotic, with that instance of a gate agent holding up a sign to corral business class passengers to one area. That being said, the rest of the boarding process is surprisingly efficient as they board from back to front, aka the better boarding method according to CGP Grey. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Alright, I also got a quick shot of the nose of the 777, which I find to be the best looking nose of any aircraft that is not the Airbus A350, before making the short walk down the jet bridge to our awaiting seats. 34B. You have 34A. Very nice, dude. Great. This is the Philippine Airlines business class cabin, which are angle flat seats arranged in a 2-3-2 configuration, which I feel to be a tad outdated, especially with no formal first-class product on the 777. However, at the time of this recording, prior to their returned A350 leases, they did have lie-flat seats in a 1-2-1 configuration. After Mabuhay business comes the economy or Fiesta class, arranged in a 3-4-3 configuration. For this flight, my grandmother and I are in seats 34 Alpha and Bravo. Quite frankly, I love the color palette that Philippine Airlines chose for their cabin, awash with blues and some wave or wind motifs. At the seat awaiting for us was a pillow, blanket with the Philippine Airlines logo on it, and some headphones with this really cool pattern on them. In addition, there's a cup holder attached to the back of the tray table, and the interior of said cup holder spins. I found this highly entertaining. Opening up the tray table, it does fold in half, and does also require some effort to get closed. At least mine did. Legroom is a full hand of width, making it more than acceptable for this 15-hour leg to Manila. There's also a safety card adorned with the same cool pattern as the headphones, a remote for the in-flight entertainment, and whoops, I dropped my blanket. Alright, let's wake up the in-flight entertainment system with a tap, and while it loads, it's time to soak in a beautiful view of our wing and engine. To the back of the seat, we have an adjustable headrest that works for me, but would probably make skyscraper gentlemen have an uncomfortable flight. There is seat recline adjustability, which we will see later, and I found a massive, as Joe Rady would say, zonk, in that there is no universal power outlet to be found. The only power for your seat comes from a USB-A power outlet and an Ethernet port. To the infotainment system, the first thing you notice is how unresponsive and sluggish it is, but I eventually managed to click my preferred language of English. There are some guides on how to use the infotainment system and remote, which I did not read, but you can pause and do so if you desire. I gave the remote a whirl and then booted up the only application I ever use on the in-flight entertainment on any aircraft, the moving map, which had a lackluster but efficient and nostalgic design. Looking out the window, I realize that there are certainly a variety of aircraft on the ground at the Los Angeles International Airport. In the foreground, Volaris is going to Oaxaca. Behind that, the Scandinavian Airlines Airbus A350 I mentioned earlier, British Airways A350, Japan Airlines Boeing 7879, and Air France 777-300ER, another Volaris A320, this one to Mexico City, an American 777-300ER, the Air Tahiti Nui 7879, and a glimpse of a Fiji Airways Airbus A350. To show you simply how unresponsive and unintuitive the in-flight entertainment is, here is me navigating the info tab. It turns out that you can only press the square with the insignia and not the text. Alright, let's go to the Philippine Airlines info. Boutique. Nice, nice. Prepaid baggage. Boutique again. No fleet page. Alright. Perhaps I'm being too harsh on Philippine Airlines here, but after flying Delta for so long, I have simply been spoiled with responsive in-flight entertainment and a variety of options. However, the selection of movies on Philippine Airlines is current and plentiful, so if you enjoy watching movies and not the moving map, then you will certainly be satisfied for the entire flight. The gaming tab of the in-flight entertainment system was unfortunately unavailable for the full flight, and the music is varied with solid options from each genre. I did get frustrated with the responsiveness of the in-flight entertainment near the end there. Now before we take off, it is worth noting that the Philippine Airlines logo is everywhere. I showed it on the blanket before, but it's also on the headphones, which I will get a better view of later. The logo is also emblazoned on the pillow. We also had the pleasure of seeing the arrival of the most recent Queen of the Skies, a Lufthansa 747-8 in from Frankfurt.
Welcome on board this Philippine Airlines flight. Before we depart, we want to let you know how much we care about your safety. This is inspired by everyone in the country. Mabuhay from Philippine Airlines, the heart of the Filipino.
We begin our taxi by an Alaska 737-900 and another 777-300ER, this time belonging to Air New Zealand, or as I like to call it, Air Aotearoa. And before I knew it was time for takeoff. begin our climb out with these last few glimpses of the United States. I like how the only two metrics on this map are Malibu and Mecca. I would find out later that Malibu changes to the nearest city, but Mecca does not, keeping a one-way track to the Holy Land in case I want to make the pilgrimage, I see. And would you know it, we're still 7,300 miles away from our destination. And now it's time to test out the recline function of the seat that I mentioned earlier. There we go. It's not bad at all.
Their reasons, the courage they can muster. Vaccines are delivered from coast to coast to supply doses to those who need them. With help from you. Philippine Airlines.
After a short period of time, we were handed out amenity kits. They opened easily from a tab, and after a sniff test, I concluded that they smelled slightly manufactured, kind of like when you step into a Ross department store. It contained pretty standard items that you would expect out of a normal economy class amenity kit, such as a toothbrush and toothpaste, an eye mask that I will model in a moment, and some socks. Ultimately, it was a decent and very appreciated amenity kit for the long flight ahead. And here is the previously mentioned eye mask modeling in full display. Now, I think I look pretty nice, but others might disagree. In addition to this, I apologize if the video is shaky, as I should not have had this much caffeine beforehand. A short period of time after my brief stint as a model, we were handed menus for the flight. I found certain aspects of it quite interesting. You may pause the video at any point to thoroughly read the menu if you desire. The menu does change on a monthly basis, so ensure that you are checking on the Philippine Airlines website to see what meal offerings you will get on your flight if you happen to be flying on board Philippine Airlines. It is now time for a tour of the lavatories. Other than them being surprisingly spacious, they were relatively standard. There was a mirror located on the door of the lavatory so you can have one last vanity check before you leave. However, it cannot be understated just how large this washroom felt, especially coming from nearly exclusively flying Spirit for the past year. I had a good 6 inches of headroom, and being somewhere between 5'11" and 6 feet, that's a solid amount. As for the width, my leg is about half the length of a small child, and it matched the space I had about perfectly. There were 2 main grab handles in case of turbulence, or if you needed to shift into maximum overdrive, if you will, as well as a handle at roughly toilet seat level for some reason. Also, hold up, go back a bit. Pause, right there. You saw the proportions. Why is the toilet paper so far from the seat? Strange. Who do you think's using this thing? Elastigirl from The Incredibles? No. Alright, go back and resume. There are no paper towels found on board the Philippine Airlines washrooms, but they do have tissues. The washroom also came with the standard hand wash, along with some cologne and lotion. Now wait a minute, hold on there. Rewind again. Next to the baby changing station. There, 2 more grab handles that I missed in the initial recording. There is the toilet paper again, the trash, and another grab handle. I also decided to try on some of the cologne, which smelled alright. I believe I said earlier that I would show the headphones in a better setting, and here it is. It opens easily from the top, so you can return them back to their original packaging in a simple manner as well. And there is both Philippine Airlines insignia on both the strap and the muffs of the headphones. I also played around with some of the adjustability of the headphones. The headband is adjustable and can be pulled out. See, my head is so incredibly gargantuan in size that I did have to have these at the maximum extent that they could be pulled out. But they did fit comfortably on my head. After a slight bit of struggle untangling the wires, these 2 prongs plug snugly into the ports to the right side of your seat. Alright, now it's time to listen in on some smooth jazz. It is now almost time for lunch, and I do need to find a place for this water bottle. Unfortunately, the cup holder provided on the back of the tray table is not large enough for the water bottle. However, lucky for me, the indentation on the tray table is. Ah yes, truly a great success. Very nice. For lunch, I had the privilege of being able to try both the beef bourguignon and the Korean chicken, respectively. Meal came with a Philippine Airlines branded moist towelette, as well as a cup of water that I asked for, although other beverages were available. The utensils came with a Philippine Airlines branded napkin. You want to have the beef or the chicken first? Try it. First, I tried the chicken, and I was pleasantly surprised that the chicken was not too dry. It paired nicely with the vegetables and the rice. After that, I tried some of the beef bourguignon. The beef was nice and tender, juicy, and the noodles, while undercooked, perfectly tied all of the flavors together. Sometimes you just need that plain starch to give that neutral flavor. The carrots provided a nice bite as well, and in my opinion, it was light years ahead of the chicken, which was still good. You're with the mask. As I was eating, I noticed that Philippine Airlines provides a toothpick wrapped in paper that was adorned with their insignia. Philippine Airlines also offered a sesame bean thread noodle salad with the meal, which I did not find appetizing. It was solely a texture issue though, as the taste reminded me of one of those cucumber sides that you get with meals at certain Korean restaurants. Next up was the bread, and I am thoroughly convinced that Philippine Airlines and American Airlines cater from the exact same company in the United States, because that bread was exactly how I remember Americans being on my trip to London in my incredibly scuffed trip report. I don't even think I mentioned that bread once, but it was horrendous. It was dense and dry, but I ate it anyways because I like carbs. I probably shouldn't, but I still got a metabolism. When I'm older, it might change. Since this video shares both my outbound and inbound flights to Manila, I am filled with anticipation for the inbound flight to Los Angeles, as it is common knowledge among those in the know that airline catering is usually best when flying out of a hub city, in contrast to flying out of a destination city, as Los Angeles is for Philippine Airlines. This is because their catering department is located in that hub city, and in neutral cities that they just fly to, they have to get their catering from third-party vendors. For that reason, I am not judging foods as harshly on this leg as I will be on the return. Finally, the rice pudding. This rice pudding brought back memories from my childhood when I was allergic to milk and could only consume rice-based dairy products. I still enjoy them to this day, of course. After the first meal came a round of hot drinks, and this Philippine Airlines branded hot drink package, complete with creamer, sugar, a swizzle stick, and a napkin. I ordered the tea, which was black tea. Now, I like my tea plain, so I did not indulge in any of the garnishings offered. With that, lunch was complete, and we hit some mild turbulence along the way.
From going to the lavatory. At this time, go back to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. Thank you. Cabin crew, stations.
I learned from my trip to London through the incredibly scuffed trip report that digital records can be faulty. So we are choosing to do this the old-fashioned way now, through handwritten scripts, baby! Alright, I've been writing for quite a bit now, so with 9.5 hours left in the flight, let's try to get some sleep. The blanket felt like a standard industry blanket, soft, but you can feel the weave. Time to sleep until the next meal. Good night, lads. I slept for 1, maybe 2 hours. I simply could not get myself to rest. Now in the meantime, let's just enjoy this beauty of a wing view. I finally decided on a movie I wanted to watch. But the only language options are Japanese and Thai, so... A snack service was passed around about halfway through the flight, and it included some oatmeal raisin cookies, which I ate later upon arrival into the country, and they were delicious, and this ham and cheese sandwich. Now, I must have eaten it from the wrong side, because I got bread for about half the sandwich, and then all of the ham and cheese at the very end. The very end was an incredibly pleasant experience, but the beginning was miserable and I had to fight to get through that much bread. And right about now, you can see exactly when I realized that I would be in for the long haul with the sandwich. Now, luckily, I felt like Abraham walking his son up the hill, because the end part was about to get a whole lot better, but the first part felt absolutely miserable. Have you ever tried cardboard? You know how pizzas say, you know how Mother says that Little Caesars taste like cardboard? This one does. It gets better. When you get to the ham, it gets really good. The flavor is there. Okay, I'm into the sandwich now. About 2 hours prior to our arrival, flight attendants passed through the cabin with hot towels. Now these hot towels smelled very floral and were a welcome invitation after such a lengthy flight. It is in this moment that I would like to thank the cabin crew of our flight, and of all flights around the world. Our flight attendant for this flight was named Chelsea, yes, like the football club. There is a great hospitality to be found in Philippine Airlines crews, and they did go above and beyond when it came to satiating my unwavering thirst for water. I have a rule to drink 1 cup of water for every hour of flight, and notably for the first leg, Chelsea filled up my water bottle every pass, which, albeit infrequent, was very welcome. With that, it is time to dine. Dinner, or breakfast, was a choice between corned beef guisado and chicken sausages. And let me tell you, this is how I imagine British food tastes. Now you might ask, weren't you just in London? And yes, I was. Both foods were incredibly bland, but again, I can't really blame Philippine Airlines for this. Or I guess I can, it's their catering decision. But here's the thing, right? I'll tell you after. Alright, it's time for the overall impressions for leg 1. Now this is unfortunately not what I believe the catering of a 4-star airline should be. Everything else, though, exceeded my expectations. The legroom was surprisingly generous, the seat was comfortable, and the amenity kits were a welcome surprise. The lavatories were pleasant and spacious, especially coming from Spirit flights, and the flight attendants were friendly and welcoming. Holding pattern time. If I were a more critical individual, I would give this flight a tweet score similar to a Jeb score. But since I am neither critical nor creative enough to truly rename the Jeb score, I will simply leave this leg at the ever-famous Jocko quote, "Good." Alright, now it's time to land and enjoy some of the lightning that came with this holding pattern. Welcome to the Philippines. After a brief time deplaning, and feeling extra tired because I did not sleep the whole flight, I bid adieu to the Boeing 777, whose nose I believe to be simply the most beautiful in the industry. While I had intentions to create a video on the Philippines on my other channel, I figured there would not be enough material after having not filmed the first week of the trip. However, I did take many different kinds of transportation while here, so there is certainly no shortage of footage. The first was in Vigan, where we took their version of a taxi, which was basically a motorcycle with a sidecar. Now, I drove in both the sidecar, which happened to be too cramped for me, and the back of the motorcycle, which did happen to be slightly less cramped. Despite my lanky frame being unable to fit comfortably in the sidecar, it did look like a Mustang from the front and had Ferrari print on the cover, so I wasn't really too upset about it. So fair play to the driver's design choice. Our driver for much of the trip was wearing a Chelsea shirt. Yes, like the Premier League club, and yes, like the flight attendant's name on our first flight, as you can see here and verify with this video. Although, with all of this Chelsea talk, it is worth mentioning that they spent nearly $600 million to rank the middle of the table. Just saying. Regardless of Chelsea's pitiful performance, I believe these views are absolutely beautiful. Now, why don't you take a look at some of this? Wow. On the way to Ilocos Sur and back, we rode on a bus. Now, unfortunately, I did not get any footage of the bus on the outbound way to Ilocos Sur, which was driven by the Florida company. Now, the bus on the way back was a Jongtong bus, and it was driven by the Partas company, which is affiliated with Florida. Here's my seat on board the Jongtong bus. The legroom was quite generous, and it did have a modest amount of recline, which was good. However, the drive was going to be long, and the bus was not supplied with power or a washroom, which is unfortunate, but not a deal breaker. However, there was a noticeable lack of seat belts, and the bus was a manual transmission, which is excellent. Big fan of the lack of safety features. Oh, that's why Ilocos Sur is beautiful at night. Nice lighting, truly. After our arrival back home, I had the opportunity to ride a jeepney after long last, which unfortunately did happen to be too short for me, and when filled with people, is very cramped. The jeepney is one of the most iconic methods of public transportation in the Republic of the Philippines, harkening from the days of World War II when American soldiers introduced the Willys Jeep to the nation. They got crafty after the war and turned the leftover Jeeps into transportation for the masses, and they've remained popular across the nation since. This being said, the views out the back certainly don't hurt. We also got to see some beautiful fog roll in a phenomenon known locally as the kissing clouds. And let me tell you, these clouds moved fast. Now, this footage that you're about to see here is not sped up, but the footage shown in that previous clip certainly was. Now, a few days later, I had the opportunity to visit Sagada, which I wouldn't normally note, but I love wind and weather, so here is some fog rippling over a ridge. Now, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And I also had the opportunity to go plane spotting at the Loacan airport to see if I could catch the one flight in from Cebu Mactan. Unfortunately, it did divert that day. I also got the opportunity to ride on board another bus, this time on board Victory Liner. Unfortunately, I didn't get good footage of the exterior of our bus, but I did get a quick shot of a nearly identical bus pushing back, with the buses either being made by MAN or Daewoo, which is now owned by GM. Moving towards the interior, legroom was acceptable for me, although I do not believe it would be comfortable for a truly long journey, or one without air conditioning, with no amenities provided like on board some other buses. Welcome to Metro Manila. I rode in another one of those taxi motorcycle and sidecar tricycle doodads in Manila as well. Multiple, actually. Now, in my opinion, these vehicles are so much fun, and if you ever get the chance to visit the Philippines, I believe you absolutely need to ride in one. But alas, all good things must come to an end. So let this Saudia 777 and I welcome you back to the Ninoy Aquino International Airport, or NAIA. This is the return leg on this journey to the Republic of the Philippines, from Manila to Los Angeles. After passing through customs and security, I found out very rapidly why NAIA is rated so poorly. For our section, we had a single restaurant/convenience store. In addition, the windows were incredibly foggy. Really hard, you can see almost a Kuwait Airways 777. Now eventually the fog did clear, and when I see a 777 going from Manila to New York, I stop and stare. Now here's a stroke of fate about our plane coming in. It was Philippine Airlines Flight 113 from Los Angeles International Airport, which was our flight coming to Manila, if you recall. Now on top of that, it was on the same exact plane as well. Registration Romeo Papa Charlie 7772. as we begin to pre-board our 777-300ER back to Los Angeles, they put us on the jet bridge. Now, I didn't mind much because these large glass windows allowed me to look outside at some of the traffic on the ramp and on the runways. This made the time go by incredibly quickly for me. Oh, you're still attached to it. Great.
Welcome on board, ma'am. Let's check your boarding pass. 31 A&B, straight ahead home, just so the first row in the car.
Please set your mobile and tablet devices to airplane mode.
As we re-enter the cabin, we can see once again the business class seats arranged in a 2-3-2 recline flat configuration. Now, normally this wouldn't be industry-leading product, but on a flight of this length, I sure wished I was in these seats.
Especially during takeoff and landing.
And here are our seats, 31A and B, just a couple rows in front of where we were sitting on the outbound leg from Los Angeles. Now these seats happen to be in a bulkhead row, which means the bag does go up in the overhead bin. However, I was glad to have the extra legroom from the bulkhead and the peace of mind of not having anyone in front of me to recline into my seat. Now the view out the window is beautiful, so I'm greatly looking forward to this. Once again, we have our pillow and our blanket, standard fare for such a flight. And the legroom here is very generous, so I was looking forward to this one. Once again, headphones supplied for your convenience. And the in-flight entertainment should be noted. It is in the middle barrier between the seats. Now it is a bit difficult to take out. I wasn't sure if it was stuck or not, but it just turns out I'm weak. Now, the recline feature was broken on this flight in my seat. But this does mean that every time I sit back, it automatically reclines, so I wasn't too mad. Now, hilariously enough, we did take this trip about a month before Messi joined Inter Miami and became all the rage. So now that Inter Miami is known well on the global stage, I guess I can say I was representing Miami for this flight. Now my grandmother was a little bit confused with the in-flight entertainment as she thought that was where the tray table was. But I did show her where the regular tray table is and how to access it. Now off to the lower left side of the seat, you can find a USB-A port as well as an Ethernet port. Once again, the headrests are adjustable vertically and on the sides, which makes for a more comfortable flying experience, so that your head doesn't rattle around as you sleep.
Wrap the belt around your waist and push the end to buckle. Inflate your left vest by pulling down the inflation.
And before I knew it, in a bittersweet moment, we began pushing back and preparing for engine start on our way back to Los Angeles. You know what? We'll look it up when we get back. And as it turns out, the logo of Air Niugini is the Rajiana Bird of Paradise. Now, it's time to prepare for takeoff. As we begin our trek eastward from the island of Luzon, we were once again provided with an amenity kit. The contents within the amenity kit were identical to the outbound leg, although, once again, not industry leading by any sense of the imagination. It is still nice to be allotted the convenience of an amenity kit in economy class, something not found on a lot of carriers. Once again, menus were provided on this leg of the flight. They do change on a monthly basis, so this menu is different from the last one in the event that you would like to pause and observe some of the items contained within this menu. In addition, menus can change based on route and flight number. As you can see on this menu, it does say Philippine Airlines Flight 102, so this menu is made specific for this flight. At least I would believe it to be made specifically for this flight. As a result, my experience may not be equivalent to yours if you do so happen to choose to fly on board Philippine Airlines in the future. And right about here is where I decided it would be a genius idea to show the menu card as if it were the Star Wars introductory credits scene, where they're explaining the summary prior to the showing of the movie. Yes, this is yet another strategy that I utilized to try and entertain you on this return leg. For my first meal, I ordered the lemongrass chicken barbecue, and this came with some achara that I showed earlier. Now, achara, for those who are unfamiliar, is a Philippine pickled papaya dish, which was somewhat delicious. It's not my cup of tea, but I can see why people do enjoy it. A cake. Once again, our hot cup, which I now know is for coffee and tea later on. Some dried mango, which was excellent, but I did not get to try any. A wet wipe, and a roll with butter. Now my grandmother, she ordered the pork stroganoff, which, while the noodles were softer than what you might expect in economy class, it was overall more pleasant and flavorful than mine. The chicken happened to be extremely dry, but the extra vegetables were nice.
Joy of joys. I'm now a bodybuilder. Get my macros right.
Now once again, here is a time lapse of me enjoying the delicious food. The cake was a mango cream cake, and it was surprisingly moist given the circumstances. Would I order the lemongrass chicken again? Well, I don't think so. And the menu did state that it was barbecue, but I could not find the barbecue aspect of it at all. You enjoyed that footage and GE90 engine sound as we begin to traverse across the Pacific. But now it is time for a mid-flight snack, which, according to the menu, is a corned beef sandwich and a cookie. Now this was delicious. I could recommend it to anyone, so long as they're willing to get through the bread at the beginning. Quite frankly, it was filling, and while potentially not very nutritious, it was perfectly satisfactory and very much appreciated at this stage of the flight. I also found out through my great genius that this is actually how you're supposed to open the package, folding the top down and being able to eat it with increased convenience. And once again, we see a time lapse of me consuming the delicious food on board this Philippine Airlines 777-300ER. And I'll take this time to once again give a huge thank you to the crew on board Philippine Airlines and this flight in particular for their hospitality and you'll find out why in a moment. You see, as you may have noticed earlier, they usually give out small cups of water, but the flight attendant noticed that I was drinking so much that she gave me a full bottle. This one happened to be from Saudi Arabia, and how convenient, because the moving map once again shows our direct relation to Mecca. And at this moment we are about to cross the international date line, meaning we are about to go back a full 12 hours, resulting in us landing on the same day that we took off. Now isn't that a beautiful wing view? Now, to complement the beautiful views on board this flight, I decided to listen to some jazz, and this song in particular was the popular and famous "I've Got My Love to Keep Me Warm." And now it is time for the final meal of the trip, the breakfast, on the return leg. This came with a bread roll with butter again, as well as a fruit cup which mostly contained melons, and a best of the Philippines treat. Now I don't know what was inside here because once again it's been several months since I've taken this flight, but I do remember it was delicious. I would highly recommend it. Now I did also get the coffee on this return leg as well, because a trained immune system is the best immune system in my opinion. Now I got the chicken adobo and egg, which was braised in soy vinegar sauce and served with scrambled eggs, button mushrooms, and garlic fried rice. The chicken was once again dry, but the flavors were there, and it was overall quite tasty. My grandmother got the Salisbury steak and egg, which was minced beef patties with a demi-glace sauce, served with scrambled eggs, button mushrooms, and roasty potatoes. Neither one particularly stood out over the other, but both were perfectly satisfactory, and certainly provided me with enough sustenance for the return leg of this flight. Now, because both were dry and salty, it did deprive me of water significantly, so I was very glad to have my Bahrain Saudi Arabian water bottle there handy to be able to consume the food with efficiency. Now we have reached the sub 1,000 mile mark to Los Angeles as we cruise at 36,000 feet, and it was at this point, with so few hours left in the flight, that I noticed that the pillows were tagged with a small Philippine Airlines little bit of embroidery. And now it was at this stage in the flight, as we began our descent into the Los Angeles metropolitan area, that I decided it would be a genius idea to complement some of this footage with some fun facts about the Boeing 777. We'll lead with a piece of information that is directly relevant to Philippine Airlines. At the time of this recording, the Philippines has no direct flights to Europe, but it is rumored that Philippine Airlines wants to make a return to London Heathrow's airport, as well as Paris and Frankfurt. In addition, the reason why I find the GE90 so fascinating is that a single GE90-115B produces more power than all of the Titanics put together. And now I believe it is time to prepare for landing. So I'll go ahead and be quiet and let you guys enjoy some of the sunset footage over Los Angeles.
on our final approach and we shall be landing in a few minutes. Please ensure that your seatbelts are securely fastened. Cabin crew, stations please. Los Angeles. We have just landed 10 minutes ahead of our schedule. The time is 40 minutes past the hour 7 in the evening. And the date today is the 28th of June 2023, Wednesday. The ground temperature is reported at 18 degrees Celsius or 64.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Please remain seated with your seatbelt fastened until the aircraft comes to a complete stop and the parent seatbelt signs are switched off. May we remind you to check areas around you for items you might leave behind. For an orderly manner of this embarkation, please remain seated until your row numbers have been called upon for the training. For passengers who need assistance, such as wheelchairs, please deflate masks, Our cabin crew and ground staff will be happy to assist you. On behalf of Captains Rona Guevara, Captain Jonathan Baltro, First Officer Louis Somana, and Second Officer Justin Alpahola, and the rest of the crew, we would like to thank you for flying Philippine Airlines, the heart of the Filipinos.
And welcome back to the United States and the Tom Bradley International Terminal that we departed out of from Los Angeles about a month ago. While I am certainly a little bit down having left the Philippines, seeing the carriers that I grew up and am familiar with, as well as Hawaiian Airlines, which I guess is now Alaska under the new management, but still remains the Hawaiian Airlines paint colors, it certainly doesn't hurt. And a Fiji Airways Airbus A350 is simply the icing on the cake. As you may have guessed, the audio of this video was recorded over the course of many months, so the volume and the tone of voice has changed, but one thing has stayed consistent throughout, and it is my narration. I decided to do this video without any music or background audio outside of the normal ambient sounds, because I truly enjoyed the work of Simply Flying, another Tripreport channel, and I felt like it truly envelops the airport experience, the travel experience without audio, and it helps retell the story as it happened. In addition, I am personally biased towards this style of video and trip reporting. I always like to see the full takeoff and the full taxi in every trip report that I see, so I figured I might as well make content that I like, because realistically I'm going to be the only one watching it back. But let's enjoy the final moments that we have in this Philippine Airlines Boeing 777-300ER. Upon arrival, I took a final few glances at our Boeing 777-300ER once again, and began heading my way up the jet bridge. Oh, and we can't forget to look at the nose. Upon receiving the wheelchair and exiting the jet bridge, I found out that there is some wonderful plane spotting to be had on this overhead deck just outside of the jet bridge, but before customs begins. I got another couple shots of our aircraft, as well as some footage of the Hawaiian Airlines A330 that we saw upon our taxi to the gate. Here we have the Fiji Airways Airbus A350 that we saw earlier preparing to push back. Off in the distance there is a French B A350 departing for Paris Orly. And you know, I certainly could not miss taking a quick little video of that before once again getting some wonderful footage of the Fiji Airways A350. Now, I love the Fiji Airways livery. It may be one of my favorite, if not my absolute favorite livery out there. And the only livery that I believe could compete is the Air New Zealand Fern livery. And as the camera pans here, you can see the sheer diversity of the airlines offered to fly on at the Los Angeles International Airport. And before I knew it, we were arriving home. Therefore, I would like to thank everybody that we visited in the Philippines for their hospitality, as well as the hospitality of the Philippine Airlines crew. My experience in the Philippines was very pleasant, and I'm eager to return to the nation soon. For now, let's just enjoy this final bit of landing footage and be glad that this 1 hour, 29 minute, and 42 second video is over. And I will make an amendment to that. We are now well over 1 hour and 30 minutes deep into this video.